Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. This is King Orange here, back again for another video. Today we are doing a podcast of Star Wars The Clone Wars Season 6. And here with me I have Darth Haywood over here, who is going to be accompanying me.
Oh, that laugh never gets old. Okay. All right, I had to. All right. So we are covering season 6. This will go on Orange's channel. The final season will go on my channel. So before we get started, we have a couple things we have to take care of. Some background information. This
The fun
season,
stuff.
yeah, the fun stuff. This is the stuff that I was able to research anyway. So this season is, in every official source that I've been able to come up with, is referred to as the Lost Missions. Now, this originally was on Netflix, but before they took it off of streaming services and they put it back on. And this never actually made it to air. It was only available on streaming services. So you can only find it on Netflix. Well, now it's Disney Plus, because Disney Plus is the only place you can technically find it, aside from some other places. And this season also has one of the strangest. It has the strangest string of episodes out of all the seasons of Clone Wars that we've reviewed. This is the one that its consistency is just a roller coaster.
It is a roller coaster in every sense. And also what's kind of neat is like this is arguably this is the first season that pretty much in full has released after the Disney buyout, because season 1 through 4 was completely under the old Lucasfilm administration, and then season 5, the final few episodes were released under the Disney administration, but they were like already finished by the time
Yeah.
the buyout happened. And so season 6 was already in production before Disney buyout, but a lot of the elements never really got finalized until afterwards, and in my viewpoint, that's probably a contributing factor for its very fluctuating quality.
Yeah.
But
And another thing we should note here, this actually started in season 3, but now we've officially got, all the Jedi in their Revenge of the Sith attire, I guess you could call it, because this is
close to it. I think it's still the same designs as season 3 through 5, I
yeah, it
think.
is, but now everybody's in it. Like, they've got the full robes. There's very little in terms of combat armor anymore. That's all gone, basically.
Yeah, so with that out of the way, I think as far as background information goes, that's pretty much about it. And also that for the longest time, this was pretty much the last season to come out for a good 7 years before eventually Disney revived Star Wars: The Clone Wars for season 7.
Yep.
So, so let that really sink in that for a good 7 years, this was it.
Yeah,
This
this
was
was
the
it.
last of Star Wars: The Clone Wars that we were going to get for a while.
The
And it
lost
came out.
season. The lost
And
season.
what also is a crazy thing about background information, this set of episodes really released, from what I can recall, it released only about like a week before Disney did the canon reset.
Really, I actually didn't know that.
I think so. Here, hold on. I'll check just to be safe, because I love getting my details right. 6 release date. Yeah,
Oh,
March 7th, 2014 was yeah, so that was when March 7th, 2014 is when it happened.
ooh.
Meanwhile,
One detail I would like to point out here: this is the only season where General Grievous does not make an appearance in any episode.
yeah, yeah. And okay, yeah, and according to yeah, okay, so I was wrong. It was about a month before, I think. I'm not sure on this. According to what I read here, March 7th, 2014 is when March of 2014, March 7th, 2014 was the release of Clone Wars Season 6. Timeline. Meanwhile, according to this, the Disney timeline reset happened on April of 2014. So,
Wow.
oh yeah, April. I finally found it. I'm sorry, this took a while to find. April 25th. So I was wrong. It's more like a month rather than a week, but still, that's like absurdly close.
Yeah. All
So
right.
it's kind of funny how all that pans out. But anyways, context out of the way, we are good to get started. So the first arc that is essentially covered is the conspiracy arc,
So,
which we're gonna have a lot to talk about with
oh
this one.
boy. Oh boy. Okay, so the first episode, basically, it's your standard Clone Wars battle, but then something weird happens. Who's the clone trooper again? I think it's Tub.
Top, I
Tub.
think,
Yeah, so Tub, he experiences a, I guess you could
mental
say,
breakdown,
yeah, and
pretty
ends up
much.
killing his Jedi general. And then they discover, well, something's very, 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 very wrong with him. And they transport him to Camino. And, well, as it turns, and also Fives is involved in this whole thing. And this is actually the only other time that, actually, this is the only other time we actually see Shock T. But basically the idea is, over the course of the episodes, it turns out that every single clone trooper has basically a brain chip that is implanted in their brains, and this is actually the cause behind the whole Order 66 thing, and also the other 167, however many there are, order contingency orders.
Yeah, effectively, these set of episodes within the context of the show is essentially showing, okay, essentially Top's mental breakdown was a malfunction of this bioimplant and effectively was a preemptive execution of Order 66.
Yeah, the idea.
And Fives is pretty much investigating the whole thing, and when he discovers what's going on, he's trying to essentially like reveal the truth towards the Jedi and the Republic, and like pretty much like everything else. Meanwhile, the Kaminoans are trying to cover it up. Obviously, Palpatine with his agenda is trying to prevent this from getting out and
Yep.
everything else. And it's essentially it's just one massive, I mean, as you would say, it's a conspiracy arc.
Conspiracy.
It's unraveling the conspiracy and everything. So I guess it would be best, given how intertwined all the episodes are, I don't really feel like it's appropriate to cover them on an individual basis and more probably just say, what would you say is the strengths and weaknesses of the arc as a whole?
Well,
And what aspects of the arc do you specifically like, want to talk about on your
well,
end?
I wanted to actually address the brain chip or the biochip thing because
Oh,
I
we're gonna have fun with this.
I have a theory. This biochip thing is designed to basically, it's basically downloading the contingency orders into the clone's brain so that when, say execute order 69, eh?
Oh, fuck you.
Well, okay,
But
let's say for example execute order 65, which is actually the order to arrest the Supreme Chancellor. It basically, it's like a database, so put into
or
it.
a lot of it's like sleeper agents when you kind of think of it. Like
Yeah.
that's pretty much what they relegated is like they pretty much recontextualize Order 66 as pretty much the trigger of a sleeper agent, pretty much. Because the other
Well,
contingency orders aren't really ever mentioned in the show itself. That's just something you have to
that's
go
a
by
that's
with
an
the
extended
EU.
lore thing. Also,
And
also,
Talking about?
The numbers, Mason. What do they mean? Where are they
I
broadcast?
don't know anything about any numbers.
ah, yeah, it really does give a lot of Black Ops 1 vibes.
I
Now,
love that.
I am now covering the whole thing about the inhibitor chips itself because I think anyone who knows anything about the Star Wars community, that is a very controversial like concept and plot point. Because for context, which we've kind of covered this a little bit back in our Battlefront 2 campaign retrospective, is up until this point, the orders were very much the clones are taught this, and when the time comes, it's essentially they're just doing what they were trained to do. It's like, oh, this contingency is designed for, oh, if the Jedi turn against the Republic, okay, we're given the order. Okay, that's what we do. The end. And a lot of people have like a point of contention because with the chips, it pretty much strips the clones of their free will and agency and again relegates them as pretty much sleeper agents. So there's kind of a big point of contention between, the whether or not which versions handled better or just generally the preferences between the two, between the clones having that free will on whether or not to carry out the order and whether or not this chip was the inclusion, like the chips were a necessary inclusion or not. So I'm gonna give my take very shortly, but I want to be fun and nice. So Deponic, I'm gonna let you give your take on that first.
Okay, so the impression I'm under is that basically the inhibitor chips are designed, a sleeper cell thing. However, it's the aftermath of when they carry out Order 66. In this case, I find the most interesting because the clones, when they go through the Order 60, well, massive spoilers for Season 7, but this kind of also carries over to Season 6 a little bit too. When Tup is, in that, he's kind of,
The zone.
Yeah, he's in the zone. You can see, how his eyes are dead. They're almost it's almost like his eyes have rolled back, but they're not in that way. So the idea is after he carries out that specific order, or in this case, when his chip malfunctions, and after it, everything happens, he's completely confused. He doesn't know what's going on, and the idea is, well, sleeper agent. But it also makes the clones a little more sympathetic because they didn't know that this was going on. They didn't know that these inhibitor chips were planted in every single clone. That includes the Bad Batch, the ARC Troopers, the Republic Commandos, the Republic Commandos, yeah, they were, and just every clone trooper. It was in millions of clone troopers, and all it took was one person willing to dig around. I described this arc almost like a Jack Reacher novel. I don't know if anybody knows Jack Reacher, but basically it's they find a big conspiracy, and then, well, a big action scene happens, and then, well, it's left not on a sour note, but more of a, well, justice was served, and then they go to the next adventure. However, in this case, unfortunately, Fives gets involved because Tup dies trying to extract the brain chip. Also, we get introduced to everybody's favorite lovable robot from this arc, AZ. He'll play a role.
Yeah, AZ on one, and he kind of does a good compliment to Five within their dual investigation. They're fun together.
Yeah.
One credit I will actually give the arc itself is that it is probably the best character work that it's handled with Fives. And that's not to say that Fives is ever handled poorly through the show. It's just this gives him the most to do.
Yeah.
Because it's not just him fighting a random battle. It's him actually genuinely having to act on his own agency to do something. But of course, tragically, it's well, because we have all seen Revenge of the Sith, this is not going to work out for him.
Yeah, and
at all,
essentially it leads up to the point where Fives discovers, well, he gets into a confrontation with the Supreme Chancellor of all people, and, Palpatine's just playing the puppet strings here. And sadly, well, before, he traps Rex and Anakin in a ray shield, I'm not gonna do the line, not yet. We're not there yet. But tragically, unfortunately, Fives gets killed by Commander Fox. Correct me if I'm wrong?
Yeah. Fox ends up shooting him after Fives tries to go for a blaster. So, and then Fives tragically dies. This is technically the last member of Domino Squad until Season 7. We won't get into that until Season 7. But for the time, we assumed that Echo was dead, so Fives was the last person of Domino Squad. Every other member of Domino Squad was killed. And it's holy crap. We spent what? It pretty much closes that out.
Yeah,
that
pretty much.
Element with Domino Squad. And yeah. And then it's definitely a good send-off, though, I would say, in that sense.
Yeah, it is a shame, though, because Fives was a decent character, at least in the Umbara arc. Because, Fives and Jesse were Was it? Yeah, it was Fox and Jesse in the when they were about to get executed, right?
Yeah, Jesse went along with that too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, now getting into my viewpoint at the inhibitor chips, I'm very torn on them. Now, if you had asked me this even just a few years ago, I was very much on the side of the camp of I did not like them at all. Like, I was staunchly anti-chips because to me it was the idea of robbing the clones of that agency. To me was like you took what was a very complex and nuanced event in the sense of, oh, because especially with the notion of like when you compare it to like World War II and the Germans and that kind of like we were just following orders and the kind of nuance that had, and you just kind of relegated it to it's not my fault, the chip made me do it. The devil made me do it. Oh wait, no, the chip made me do it.
Yeah. It's a case of they didn't really know how to explain it away. It was
that's where my viewpoint has kind of changed a little bit. Because my notion is I still prefer the way it was done before just in concept because I think generally speaking, I like the idea of the free route more. I agree with some people that it is extremely difficult to write that. I'm not going to disagree on that. And in that sense, the chips are easier to write. Because in order to write it the other way, you have to get into really complex natures of both how the Republic system operates, but also about what kind of mindsets the clones have. And I think it works well enough when you get into the clones behaving like they were in the movies or Battlefront 2, for example, where it's very, as we've mentioned before, stern, calculating, straight to the point, follow orders, the end. But the problem is, which it's a problem, but a good thing at the same time, just depends on your perspective, is the clones in TCW are just much more humanized and individualized. They're not really the archetypes of this perfect ideal state soldier anymore. They're just not. They develop them in a way where, in a way, the clones are almost like people you could imagine just meeting up with, where it's like, it's an army guy in today's world, where it's just kind of like, yeah, sure, they're in the military, but like, they're also just living an everyday life. They have their own beliefs, their own morals, that kind of stuff. And in that sense, I've come to accept the existence of the inhibitor chips in concept just because of the context of the show. I don't think it fits with the EU at all, and that's where you run into another point of contention of Star Wars The Clone Wars really just not fitting with the EU, and that really it's more of the way I see it, Star Wars The Clone Wars has always been more of an adaptation of the expanded universe rather than a jointed member of it. That's my viewpoint.
This also plays into another thing where sometimes in the EU, the clones actually did question whether the order was legitimate.
And you can't have that anymore with the chips. See, that's the point of contention now.
Except for one instance. There's only one instance where this happened, which was the Bad Batch, because they were, well, we'll get into that when
mutated, yeah, but that's getting into a whole different, show. Like, and, that was way later on when any of those concepts were developed. But as far as what Season 6 portrays with that, I think the chips, in concept, work in their own way, just differently. Even though I have a personal preference against it, I think it's fine in concept within the show. Now, the execution of how they're actually carried out by the time you get to Season 7 onwards, that's its own complicated thing, and we'll have to get to that later.
It does lead to some pretty really sad moments within the context of, say, like Jedi Fallen Order, or Season 7, or even just any time Order 66 is portrayed that's not in the film, because it's like, oh my god, like Jedi Fallen Order, you go through a flashback where you actually experience Cal's experience with Order 66, and you realize just before, oh, he's made friends with all these clone troopers. They've got personalities. They've got, a little bit of competitive friendliness. And then you're like, Order 66 happens, and it's like, oh shit, they just turned on us. And it was
now vicious killing machines trying to get you. Yeah, and that's why I say, like, they work in their own way. and at this point it's kind of an idea of I don't think they're necessary from an objective perspective. I don't think they're necessarily better or worse than how the EU was. I think it's just different. And the way I have it is just kind of like it's just a shame that there's not a lot of story maneuvers that can be done to try to make it where, hey, maybe we could have our cake and eat it too, but sadly that's just not really a thing at the moment. But regardless, concepts out of the way.
Let's go. Let's
I
move on.
like the
Oh, sorry.
I think the arc as a whole, just getting into my conclusion of it, I think it is a great wrap up for Five's story, and I think in a way this arc is sound from a story structure. I do think the only big flaw in relation to the plot itself is I feel like the Jedi have been a little... I feel like they're a little too passive in this story. If you
we'll
catch
get
what I
into
mean.
that. We'll get that in a little bit. Trust me.
Yes. We have a much bigger point of contention to talk about that. But
Okay.
But within this arc, it's a great wrap up for Five's story. It's tragic in its own way, knowing of there was a glitch in the system of Palpatine's grand plan, and Five's was this close to exposing it.
Funny.
And he just barely fell short.
It's funny because that very thing happens in Labyrinth of Evil, except
It does almost feel like a Mechno chair type incident, where it's
speaking of funny scenes from the book.
no, we have to save that for the Labyrinth of Evil.
Darn.
I'll give you a hint. It involves Gunray and Hako. You're gonna love it. But yeah, as a whole, great wrap up for Five's story. Generally is very fun to watch from just seeing how close it is, and Five's interactions with AZ is good. The drama that's built upon it is great, and overall I think it's a good start to the season overall, despite some of its logistical issues and of course the controversy it generated.
All right. So
on to the next one, the Clovis arc.
Okay, so Clovis comes back. Now, what is the premise of this whole thing? Basically, Clovis has basically discovered that the Intergalactic Banking Clan, who is one of their members is actually a member of the Separatist Council, he basically enlists Padme to help him expose basically a corruption scheme. And all the while, Anakin's not happy about this. In fact, over the course of these episodes, it even says in the description their marriage will be tested, essentially. And oh boy,
that's the understatement of the century. But
and so eventually Clovis does expose this, and for that they basically make the IBC basically make him a member, and that also puts
they make him like the new manager. Effectively, but of course
that puts him in control.
All part of the plan.
That puts him in control of the stock markets or the markets itself. Or just
he's given control over the bank's finances, pretty much, which Dooku and Sidious orchestrate on purpose in order to effectively use Clovis as a fall guy for essentially the plan to give Palpatine the ability to nationalize the banks under the Republic.
Yeah.
So,
which leads to the greatest clone last stand in Star Wars history. Commander Thorn with his minigun. Salute to that clone, man. That guy went down fighting.
Respect.
Not since the other episode, which is Supply Lines, I believe, but not since that last stand have we had a greater clone death. And my god. And also, as we mentioned in season 5, droid gunships, guys. Droid gunships. And they drop off super battle droids. And these things, and also Padme's stuck in the tower. I can't believe I'm saying that.
Yeah, it's all around a great scene, but
Rapunzel, let down your hair.
What?
Rapunzel, let down your hair.
Oh,
she's stuck in a tower, and then things get out of hand because also Anakin. Basically, the Separatist attack on Scipio gives the Republic justification to intervene and send reinforcements, and Anakin, and
that gives Palpatine what he needs to essentially nationalize the banks under his control. So, and that's where it's a very politically focused arc, which is kind of rare for the show, but I think getting right away into one element I do really like about it, I like the conflict that is generated between Anakin, Padme, and Clovis, and the kind of relations that is built off of that, where, yeah, Anakin and Padme go through a lot of friction, and I think it's kind of neat because I think it's one of the only times Anakin and Padme actually get any serious development as a couple.
Besides the one where the episode where Clovis was actually first introduced.
Yeah, back in season 2.
Yeah, and that was before landing at Point Rain, by the way. And also another fun thing here. During over the course of the episodes, they actually get chased by Embo, and Embo makes an appearance here, and I really like this character. And also, unfortunately, it also leads to a situation where Anakin has to he's stuck in a trolley situation. Does he save Padme and let go of Clovis, or does he try to save them both? Unfortunately, Clovis lets go and he dies.
He pretty much makes the choice for him at this point because and it kind of represents where it's like it actually unironically made me kind of warm up to Clovis a little bit because in season 2 I did not like him at all.
No.
He was an A. But like in this, it's actually nice that they explored him as a very nuanced and morally gray character where, yeah, he gives in to the pressures of doing a lot of bad stuff, but he definitely does come across as someone who did genuinely care about making the Banking Clan an honest organization again. It's just because of the external pressures and because of his own pride, he just doesn't really see that he's getting played.
Oh, so
which
Dooku basically lays it out for him. Yeah, why? How do you think you got to this position in the first place? It's like we basically put you there, and it's like now you're going to do exactly what we want. Otherwise, bad things are going to start happening.
I'm afraid we can't pay off the interest rate if you don't do this. Like, it's just... And it kind of does bring up an interesting paradigm, which I feel like in concept, it's not a bad idea, but I feel like the show doesn't explore it to the degree that it should, is what exactly the political situation between the Republic and the Separatists are in relation to the neutral organizations. Because I think an element that's kind of puzzling a little bit is like the entire premise of the war is based on the fact that the Republic refuses to recognize the Separatists as a legitimate thing, the CIS. Yet, in this instance, literally in order for the banks to undergo any kind of transition of power, both governments have to approve of it.
Oh, that's
so it's
right.
like...
Yeah, it's true.
So it's kind of like, wait, so they're not legitimate, but then in this case, you're treating them like they are. So what's going on here? Like, it's... And like I said, I think the idea could work if it was just given a little more exploration, but the problem is TCW has a very nasty habit of essentially setting up concepts, but then they don't go anywhere.
Good example. Well, I like to compare it to the droideka, the sniper droideka. Great concept, not used anymore. Also, since the IPC, since they're a neutral party and they kind of maintain control over the banks.
Neutral, I say in quotations.
However,
because it's very clear that most of its members have a very, not the most settled bias towards the Separatists, but it's like, it's a case of technically they're neutral, which kind of gets into, I never really covered it in season 3, even though I feel like we should have, so I feel like this is kind of a good opportunity to cover it. How do you feel about TCW kind of retroactively changing the nature of the Trade Federation, Banking Clan, and Techno Union to be these neutral, I say in quotations, these neutral parties that have relations to both the Republic and Separatists, while I feel like the context of the films kind of made it more cut and dry, where like, yeah, no, these corporations are very openly siding with the CIS. So what's kind of your take on that? Do you feel like that was like a good change, a bad change? Do you feel like it was like good in concept but just needed more exploration? What do you think?
Well, the thing about the episode, what is it, Heroes on Both Sides, I think it is. Basically, the idea is that, as the guy says, the Techno Union, the Corporate Alliance, and the Trade Federation are all about business, not war. But in this case, war is their business. So they're playing. They basically have the idea that these corporations are basically the war profiteering side of things, and the fact that they can get away with saying, "Oh, Newt Gunray doesn't technically represent us because he's the extreme side of things." You've got now Sandhill's a little weird because he's more, I don't know.
I don't even think he makes an appearance in the show.
No, he doesn't. But
yeah,
the fact that he is a member of the IBC and is meant to represent that side of things, he doesn't represent the extreme option here. Then you got Wat Tambor, who is the representative of the Techno Union. The Techno Union is Wat Tambor doesn't represent the extreme side, but he is technically that side of the warmongering and all the dirty stuff, basically. And
that's where it's puzzling, because it's like, I feel like ever since TCW made that retroactive change, it's like, it's a good idea in concept. I think there's a lot you can explore with that, of how both sides are essentially having to kind of make a deal with the metaphorical devils with these corporate heads and everything else. But the problem is like, the show just, it's another world building detail issue where it's like the show doesn't really get into detail on, like, wait a minute, why is it that like, especially in the case of the Republic, why are they not getting involved? Like, if the corporations are pledging support, like giving resources stuff to the CIS, why is that not just grounds to nationalize their assets like they do with the banking clan in this arc? So it's just a puzzling situation, and I think it's a case of saying the political subtext of the Clone Wars is probably, it's a great set of episodes when they do show up, but they just don't show up enough. And it's like,
here's an interesting metaphor here. Basically, the representatives from the corporations that are that actually sided with the CIS, they are basically the OCP of the Separatists, essentially. That's how I see it, because they prioritize.
Honestly, the OCP would fit right in with Star Wars.
Pretty much.
They really would.
I mean, it's crazy to think about it. I mean, it's actually a good comparison, and the fact that they prioritize profits over everything else kind of makes sense. And also, these other representatives that actually are in the Republic Senate do have that, like, OCP mindset, but they're more nuanced in a way. They have this more, they're difficult to figure out, kind of, because they
and that's where you get into the whole, like, the political subtext is just kind of left very vague. And sometimes I question if they do it intentionally, or if it's just a case of, oh, we're mostly gearing the show for a younger audience. We're not going to give a shit about politics.
And also, war profiteering is a very serious subject and has real life implications here. So, wow, it has real life,
implications. Yeah, it's just that, it's a strange situation, but I'll at least give credit where it's due, that at least this arc at least tries to be politically nuanced with everything going on, even to the point, like, when Dooku finally does initiate the invasion of Scipio, the one Separatist senator that's there to oversee the transactions on the Separatist side, even he's like, Dooku, what the fuck? We can't do this shit.
Exactly.
Like, this doesn't, like, why are we doing this? This makes no fucking sense. And Dooku's just like, here, I'm gonna have the fourth Padme dead out of the way.
Yeah, pretty much.
You could imagine Dooku probably spin some story that Padme, like, assassinated him just to...
Yeah, and given how many times they've tried to assassinate her, I mean, framing her for a crime is actually not outside the realm of possibility. Anyway,
yeah, probably not. But yeah, the Clovis arc as a whole, it's still overall pretty well done. I do like especially what they do with the drama surrounding Anakin and Padme, and even I like it gives Palpatine a lot to do behind the scenes, which is nice.
It's funny. It's one step towards ultimate power, and it's basically they transfer control of the banks to Palpatine himself, so to ensure, as he says, so that Dooku doesn't get his grubby little hands all over it, essentially. And it's actually kind of
The
a
introduction of the United States central banking system in a nutshell.
pretty much. All right, so the next episode is not actually an arc; it's just a two-parter. Is The Disappeared. Oh no!
we are
Okay,
in for-
okay. Time out. We have to address something here. So basically, the idea is that basically a princess of some kind goes missing, and Windu is sent to investigate. He teams up with Jar Jar. Now, I know what a lot of people are gonna say here. I'm gonna defend this. Jar Jar in the Clone Wars series is not as bad. He's not bad as a character. And keep in mind a few things here. Ahmed Best, who plays Jar Jar in the films, he went through some massive backlash and he almost, unalived himself, we'll just say. So
yeah, we can't really go full on because, YouTube censorship.
God forbid we actually mention that. Anyway, the point is, it was because of that Jar Jar got a bad rap. And because of that, Ahmed Best got a bad rap too. However, in this case, I say that this is a case where
At least they try to make Jar Jar useful in this, which is
I just remembered something.
Is a far cry from how he is portrayed a lot of other places. It's like, he genuinely tries hard in this, and they give him a personal stake in it, even if it's in a very strange way.
Because it turns out this princess is Jar Jar's girlfriend. I'm like, okay, first of all, this princess is a duck. Okay? I'm sorry, I can't unsee this. What the actual fuck, guys? Look, inter-alien species mixing, okay? That's fine. That's all fine and dandy.
I mean, that's not new to Star Wars.
That's not new to Star Wars in any capacity. But this just feels off.
It's
also,
puzzling.
Also, another thing is that they use these two episodes to basically play the buddy cop situation. Serious cop, more laid back cop, kind of like
Good cop, like serious cop, not so serious cop.
Yeah.
It's
Also,
because you have Jar Jar, who's very goofy all around, paired with like one of the most stoic Jedi ever known to man.
And Windu's he's probably thinking to himself, why of all the people, why did I have to get stuck with him? But then they kind of work out their differences, and it turns out this princess was kidnapped by a cult who is run by Mother Talzin. Now, if you don't remember, oh boy.
Yeah,
okay.
And that's when we're going to get into a lot of interesting stuff related to Talzin.
Okay, one thing here. So, after the massacre on Dathomir, there was a thing that happened. There was a comic series called Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir. This actually explains how what Maul was up to after that whole thing. After
after Sidious got him.
Yeah. So he escapes because of his Death Watch buddies or his soldiers. Then
and the main reason we're covering this is this was originally going to be a season 6 arc.
Yeah. So and he actually captures Dooku, brings him before Talzin, and Talzin says, "Hey, Palpatine is coming. We got to prepare for this." So she possesses Dooku, and Palpatine brings along General Grievous to basically tie up Maul while he deals with Talzin. And Talzin is possessing Dooku, and he says in the comic, you may possess his body, but you possess none of his skill, and basically, essentially exorcises her, and then,
and Talzin eventually dies. So it's like,
hand.
Yeah, this takes place before that, but like, a mindset I've always had is Talzin is such a broken character in this show because the amount of shit she can do is maddening to just any ordinary person. Like, there's Night Sister magic, and then there's this. And what makes it even more like crazy is the show in this arc has a really weird dialogue segment where she says, "Oh, you would be good to know that I am not a force wielder like the Jedi or Sith. I achieve power through dark magic." And I'm like, wait, so are you saying you're not force sensitive, or what?
The idea behind the Night Sisters is that they use like rituals and a lot of actual like magic stuff. They're very much a coven of witches, essentially. That's how they get their powers.
It's just the show has a weird way where it always the waters with her is very convoluted, and it's yeah, generally it's just to me it just goes, especially when you have just broken beyond belief, like being able to manifest a weapon out of thin air.
Using your magics to eventually
She's
make this is nothing
just
this is nothing new in, like, say, other universes where, like, for example, Skyrim, there's spells that can manifest a weapon or Dungeons and
but for
Dragons.
Star Wars, this is like
This is different.
kind of a little.
I mean, Star Wars has always kind of played around with the idea of magics because you've got the ancient Sith Lords who actually use dark side magics to create stuff. So it's not outside the realm of possibility. That anyway. So Windu,
Yeah, it's just a strange thing altogether. But
Yeah.
eventually, Windu and Jar Jar succeed in rescuing the Queen, foiling Talzin's plan, and happy-go-lucky. This, I would say, this two-parter is shaky. It definitely has a lot of just all-around weird elements, but I can't really say that I hate it. It's kind of just, I think it definitely represents one of those arcs where it's like it's there. That's kind of the way I
it's
see it.
there. You can skip over it. You don't necessarily need to know anything. It doesn't play a major role. It's just an episode to fill out the quota.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's one of those fillers. But, it's fine. And honestly, Mace's and Jar Jar's interactions are fun enough. So
Yeah,
I can run with it.
All right.
Now we're about to get to the last four, and this is where we're going to get really big logistical can of worms.
Okay.
First, beginning with the Lost One.
So this episode starts with Plo Koon finding Sifo Dyas's lightsaber. Now, if you don't know who Sifo Dyas is, he's the guy mentioned in all the way back in Attack of the Clones. He's basically the guy who placed the order for the clone army under the request of the Senate. However, he died. So now this leads into a whole thing where it turns out that somebody actually, like, basically the Pikes
orchestrated his death, which
the Pikes
for
are
any of the audience members out there, it's pretty obvious who did it.
Also, this brings back Chancellor Valorum because there was a file that was sealed. And
add to the tally of EU retcons.
Yeah, weird thing. And also
add to the tally.
So, and basically what ends up happening is, well, Valorum's aide, I guess, he's captured by the Pikes. Obi-Wan and Anakin go to basically question him, and surprise, well, Dooku's there. And he even says some things are just so important.
Sometimes things are just that important. I think that's what he says, but
yeah.
Before getting into that, we'll get to that just for a second. There's another weird retcon thing that is kind of a contradiction that really doesn't work, is Yoda's interaction with the Chancellor, because what they find out is they want information surrounding Sifo Dyas's death and all of that. However, they say, oh, this was sealed off. This file is restricted by the Office of the Supreme Chancellorship. So naturally, Yoda goes to Palpatine about this. And Palpatine's like, oh, how long did this incident happen? 10 years ago. And he's like, oh, 10 years ago, I was a senator from Naboo, and that was Chancellor. But that technically isn't true, though. Because assuming that Season 6 is around Revenge of the Sith territory by this point, which you naturally would think, maybe a few months before, Palpatine's already Chancellor by then. Like, that would be 13 years ago, not 10. So it's a minor continuity error done within the show itself. It's just, it muddies the waters. Even further, and then it makes the mechanics surrounding on when Sifo Dyas's death happened also weird, because it's kind of like, well, wait, Sifo Dyas can't die during Chancellor Valorum's run because Attack of the Clones establishes Sifo Dyas was killed almost 10 years ago. So that would, and given that we know Attack of the Clones is set 10 years after The Phantom Menace, that would insinuate that Sifo Dyas's death would have had to have happened after that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Which leads into the original EU with, the original EU establishes that Dooku didn't join the Sith until after the events of The Phantom Menace. While this very much insinuates, and Tales of the Jedi kind of also gets into this, is that it pretty much suggests that Dooku was already working with the Sith even prior, which is just... Even saying this in regards with Tales of the Jedi, as much as I love that series for what it does for Dooku as a character, I really just do not like the decision of them insinuating Dooku was already working with the Sith even before the events of the Phantom Menace. It just doesn't fit.
It doesn't feel right. But it does lead to one of the best lightsaber duels in this series, which...
Yes, one of the only saving even though one of the best duels, very well choreographed, one of the best use of Kevin Kiner's score, and
then
very well designed, where it's like, it's a nice reversal where Dooku's purposely trying to keep Anakin on defense while goading Obi-Wan into attacking, and essentially having them play against their strengths, which is smart. It's a good move on his end. The problem is,
what comes next?
This kind of makes the line in Revenge of the Sith make even less sense, because not only are we have two line issues. The first is, this time we'll do it together.
I was about
Master,
to say,
last time we fought Dooku, we did do it together. And then the second one being, my powers have doubled since the last time we met, Count. Since when? Last week?
However, I have to address this. This episode takes place months before Revenge of the Sith.
But still, like, even if... Since when? Last month? Like,
yeah.
Still, it's the same
and then
concept where...
And then get ready for the biggest mind fuck here.
Tactical nuke incoming!
So the Pikes show up, and the leader says, "You have no more business with the Pikes, Tyrannus." Tyrannus? You are the man called Tyrannus? It's like, okay, whoa, time out.
We gotta get into hold on. We'll get into the logistics of that just one moment. So from there, after the revelation, Kenobi pretty much said just that, and Dooku's like, "I told you everything you need." Blah blah blah. Dooku eventually escapes after more lightsaber fighting, and then it gets to the Council. Now, you would naturally think that now that the Council know that the Clone Army was orchestrated by the Sith, you would naturally think that would unlock a lot of implications, and they would have to re-strategize their plan. You would naturally think, yes, they're going to totally change up their game in order to adjust to this new important information, right?
Wrong!
Right?
Wrong!
Well, if you thought that, I'm afraid you are truly, deeply...
Wrong!
No, Yoda's whole plan is, fought by the clones we did for many years. Believe in them we must. Win the war we must.
Cover it up we must. Bullshit this is, but care we do not. Oh.
The amount of bullshit this is. So, in case you do not understand the ramifications of this, the Jedi now know that the Clone Army is orchestrated by the Sith, and the amount of information this should give to them is astronomical, that for them not to grasp it literally makes them idiots.
Although one line from Attack of the Clones kind of defeats this, lies, deceit, creating mistrust are his ways now.
Problem is, Dooku's not the one that reveals that. The Pikes are. And unfortunately, because of the Pikes' standing with the Jedi at this point in time, because they're trying to cover their own asses for what they did, they have no incentive to lie. That's the issue. So, pretty much the Jedi now have to accept the truth, which even they themselves acknowledge. The problem is they do nothing with this information. So now it's at a point the Jedi know this. So let's think about all the things that the Jedi would now naturally know because of it. One, they know Dooku had a direct hand in the creation. B, so let's account for that. So they know the Sith are involved. So not only should they know, okay, what motive would the Sith have to create an army that would fight for us? Well, the first one is very obvious. They would obviously rig the army to destroy us. I mean, that goes without saying. And, Yoda says the whole, fought by the clone side many years we gotta try. And I could almost understand that as a, weighing the clones, actions for the Jedi versus against them and all that. That could even make sense a little bit if it wasn't for the fact that just a week ago, you experienced a case of two clones, allegedly, going psycho and murdering a Jedi, attempting to kill another Jedi, and also going mad and trying to kill the Chancellor. Now, yes, in fairness, because of that incident, it at least absolves Palpatine as a suspect, but you now have a hardcore case that the clones very much can and have acted against the interests of the Republic and the Jedi.
Also, there have been multiple instances across the 5 seasons so far of clones actively betraying the officer and the Jedi. Like, for example, back in season 1, you had one, then you had...
Well, yeah, but I'm not even referring to that, though, because Slick was just a straight-up traitor.
And also
who had very straightforward motivations. I'm talking like the Jedi already know the clones can be rigged to essentially go rampant. And so they already know, and yet they know this information, yet they create no contingency plans to protect themselves. And secondly, so it makes the idea of them being blindsided by Order 66 stupid as all fuck.
Oh, God, yeah.
Because you should have just by default know there's a chance to do this. The second and more important ramification is, okay, as far as your assumption went, the Sith agenda was, okay, they're controlling the CIS directly, and essentially the CIS, the whole separatist movement, is nothing more but a smokescreen for the Sith to effectively reign supreme with their droid and shit. That was the assumption you were operating for the longest time. Now you have to ask the question, like, pretend you're a Jedi. You have to ask the question, why, if the goal was just to conquer the galaxy with this and then just create a Sith empire after the fact out of that, why would you then give the Republic and the Jedi an army to actively prevent you from doing it? And there's only one logical answer the Jedi could come to. That the Sith are purposely rigging the war, and that the Sith agenda is directly tied not towards the Separatists, but to the Republic. And by this point, the Jedi should absolutely have an understanding of this war is rigged. There's no, scenario where the Republic and the Jedi can really save themselves. And so, by this point, a lot of people, the whole saying at this point is, logically speaking, the Jedi absolutely should have withdrawn from the point. And before, people in the comment section call this absurd, look, I understand the Jedi care about the Republic. I do. But at this point, the writing is on the wall that there's no scenario where they're going to stop what is happening. And this is obviously made worse to figure out in later. But even just going by this episode, they obviously know the war is rigged at this point, yet their only strategy is just, let's just keep fighting.
Let's cover it up, essentially.
Cover it up and just keep fighting as if we don't know. And it's like, how does that make any sense? You are directly playing into the Sith's hands by doing this. This isn't a strategy. This isn't a whatever. I could even understand, and, people say about the withdrawing the war being absurd. And fine, I'll be fair. Let's say, yeah, sure, maybe the Jedi wouldn't want to do that, because then that would just lead to the Sith, winning with either the Separatists or rigging the Republic. So fine, let's just say that is the reason why they don't withdraw. Why are they not creating contingencies to protect themselves in case the clones turn against them? And B, why are they not incentivizing, okay, fine, let's not leave the war, but let's at least focus less on that and more on, okay, let's investigate the actual mall in the Republic. Because they would have to know there is one by this point. There's no other reason why the Sith would actively be aiding the Republic in fighting against their their obvious agenda. There's no other reason.
Yeah, unfortunately, the ramifications here are just they're too. They pretty much break the entire lore of the Clone Wars essentially by basically saying
Effectively, like, dude, in order for me to really like mentally maintain some coherency, I have to burn that entire episode. Really, just this whole arc, but I'll get into the Yoda ones later. I have to effectively burn this episode out of like my head canon, essentially, in relation to the show, because it's like with this being existing in the entire ramifications of the after this point makes no sense.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, so the final arc is actually the Yoda arc, which basically it starts off with Yoda.
It's a direct follow-up to
pretty
this
much.
episode.
So basically Yoda, he receives a vision from Qui-Gon. Now, keep in mind there was a scene in Revenge of the Sith where Yoda was actively talking to Qui-Gon, I believe.
Qui-Gon, and I think doesn't Attack of the Clones insinuate that Yoda was already communicating with Qui-Gon?
No.
Where Anakin's slaughtering the Tuskens.
Although, okay,
because Qui-Gon's voice can be heard there.
That's in the new versions of Attack of the Clones. In the original, in the subtitles, it was just a mysterious voice. It does sound like Qui-Gon, but later versions basically corrected the subtitles by having Qui-Gon's voice in there.
But doesn't that still create a retcon, though?
In a way, yeah. Although,
add to the tally of retcons.
The thing is, though, Yoda wasn't actively communicating with Qui-Gon at that point in that scene. He was just, meditating, and he caught a whiff of what was going on. Because the implication is that...
Yeah, I guess you could just make the argument that maybe Yoda would decipher who it was at the time.
Yeah. So, anyway...
Like he knew someone was communicating with Anakin to stop him from trying to slaughter the Tusken, but didn't know who. Like, he didn't recognize the voice yet. Like, that's probably the only explanation you could really...
Yeah, so this arc...
But still, on to the arc.
So, Yoda is in the infirmary, and he basically says, "Hey, Anakin, you're good at disobeying the council. What? Can you give me a hand, basically?" And he takes R2 along for this ride to basically learn, effectively the secrets of immortality or something like that. Basically,
yeah, it's like the Spirit Quest that's supposed to start his journey on becoming a Force Ghost.
Yeah.
Because
it's actually
Qui-Gon essentially... Yeah, because when Yoda commutes to Qui-Gon, he goes to Dagobah, and Qui-Gon essentially says, Yoda's like, can you manifest your... My training was never completed at that time. So he says to Yoda, you need to complete what I couldn't. And Yoda goes through this quest where just in the first episode, we have another breaking element. Because the vision that is shown to Yoda on Dagobah is everything that happens in Revenge of the Sith.
Okay.
As if the last episode wasn't broken enough, we now know definitively that Yoda is aware the clones are going to turn. Knows that Sidious is going to create the Empire out of the Republic. He knows all of this shit.
Then again, though, that is just a vision. It was never set in stone, at least from the character's point of view. However, there are two things here that are
always in motion. The futurist, but still, it's the case of all of this. This is a possibility, and the fact it's even a possible future means ramifications that things that the ramifications absolutely change everything. Yet again, the Jedi do nothing. But putting that aside...
So, Yoda runs into these three mystics, and he goes on his journey. He encounters a evil version of himself, which is kind of interesting, because we've never actually seen an evil version of Yoda beyond some pictures you can find on the internet. But then there's another...
I think the closest an evil Yoda even gets hinted on Dark Rendezvous. Dooku essentially has a visioned image of what that, and pretty much even says if Yoda ever Sidious stand a chance.
Yeah. But then we get another lore breaking thing. Hold on. I have to go get the book. 1 second.
And ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing the Nerd Rage Rant. Have fun.
Okay, so Yoda ventures to Mortis or not Mortis, Korriban, I believe, and
Korriban, in the context of they decided in all their foreseen wisdom to rename it into Moraband.
Moraband, okay. Anyway,
I think from what I've heard behind the scenes, it's because George couldn't pronounce Korriban,
that's okay.
or maybe he just felt like it didn't sound. I don't know.
Anyway,
George is a weird
person. So he encounters the spirit of Darth Bane, Darth Bane trilogy here. Now, how does Yoda know about the Rule of Two thing? Like, how does he know that Bane created
already knowing about the Rule of Two? Which, I'll be fair, the Phantom Menace already kind of makes that a shaky ground. But at least in the Phantom Menace, it's left ambiguous enough where, okay, maybe Yoda's just referring to the old line of Sith. Meaning, like, even before the Rule of Two was a thing, it was always a case of, okay, there are always 2 Sith per line. So even back in the old Sith Empire, you always had a master, always had an apprentice. The apprentice kills the master, they become the new master, etc. And yeah, maybe, Yoda's probably looking at, like, yeah, the old Sith Empire had multiple Sith lines, but that's just how it went. So, at least the Phantom Menace was vague enough with that, but yeah, the fact that Yoda actually knows who Bane is, that is lore-breaking.
Oh, God. And that creates so many...
And not just to the EU, but even the films, that's kind of a contradictory notion, because the Jedi are supposed to be... Well, the Jedi are essentially having to operate on... that have been extinct for 1,000 years. So, you can't simultaneously say the Jedi would to be extinct, but then also know about the Sith Lord that brought the Sith into hiding for that 1,000 years. That doesn't make any sense.
Oh my God. And... yeah, and then, Yoda goes through essentially a vision quest where essentially he goes up against Darth Sidious. Now, there are some implications here that this is a spirit or a vision quest where he's not actually...
It's like an illusioned reality.
Yeah.
It's not actually going on, it's all inside the characters' heads, essentially, which is fine in its own merit, and I'll actually give credit where it's due to the episode. They actually do give a lot of good subtext with Sidious, which is great.
I like the fact that he is he's dubious. He even like he uses the lightning to basically create the illusion. He has to have Dooku help him, and then during the illusion, they actually go to his little hidden layer in the industrial district, and Sidious shamelessly throws Dooku at Anakin. And then he runs away.
Yeah, it's foreshadowing much, but it's a case of saying, but again, it leads to another weird situation because now Yoda has a direct confrontation with Sidious. Does very clearly show Yoda knows Sidious exists at this point, which I'm not as bothered by that because in fairness, around the same time, going by the EU, Labyrinth of Evil occurred in a similar time frame. And so by then the Jedi also know, but the fact that Yoda has a direct confrontation with Sidious is kind of like...
Oh, that's another thing. The original voice actor for Sidious in the first 5 seasons, I believe, he actually passed away. So, the Palpatine that is in this season is voiced by Tim Curry. I am not joking. I cannot... Oh my God. What?
I'll be fair to Tim Curry, though. I actually think his Sidious voice is pretty good. It's just his Chancellor Palpatine.
This is the actor who, in Red Alert 3, he says, "I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism." He, during that whole thing, he's constantly flubbing his lines, and he goes, "Space!" That's literally the take they went with. Tim Curry, don't get me wrong, he's a fine actor. He can play the mustache-twirling villain quite well, actually. He does it a couple of times. But voicing Palpatine, of all people, it would have been interesting if they actually brought Ian McDiarmid back to voice him. It would have been actually really good. It
would have been neat if they did. And the one credit I'll actually give for how they handle shows is that they actually did bring for pretty much most of the shows. Like, he voice acts Sidious. He voice acts Palpatine in The Bad Batch. In Rebels. He, actually him in the Kenobi show. I may hate that show to death, but good move.
I love his scene in the Kenobi show, believe it or not.
Yeah.
It's actually
it's good.
It's really good,
but,
actually.
But yeah, and that's kind of the tragedy in relation. This arc is so messy, even though the one credit I give is I like that just the season as a whole, it gives Sidious a lot to do and puts him more on the forefront, which I think, given how close we are to Revenge of the Sith territory by this point, I think is appropriate. It's just kind of a shame that it has to occur in written episodes that are so convoluted.
Oh,
but
yeah.
The one credit I will also give, even though this arc really has bad ramifications given what Yoda knows, I like the spirit quests themselves. I like the first one where Yoda has to take on a version of himself and essentially accept, even though it's kind of unreconcilable with Dark, because he's already accepted it in Dark Rendezvous, but again, pretend the Clone Wars is just an adaptation. Yoda having to accept that dark side is part of him, I think works well for his character in there. And I appreciate it actually gives him character development. Same goes with the second quest. I love the second quest where he has that, essentially the Jedi Order and essentially all the Padawans and younglings dying. And then it has the scene where he's essentially, one of the vision manifestations occurred. One of the Padawans from one of the younglings from season 5 essentially guides him to this alternate reality where everything is peaceful and loving, and this is a world where Qui-Gon never died and Dooku never joined the Sith, and it's pretty much the blissful ignorance that Yoda clinged to for so long. And essentially, it's really good with his character work where Yoda essentially has to snap out of it by really accepting, this is not reality. This is the world I may have wished had occurred, but that's not the reality. The reality is Qui-Gon is dead. The Jedi are at war, and my apprentice, the person who I practically looked at as a son, he is now given himself to the dark side. He is now an enemy. And it's kind of sad that that's the only time the character work is really used in it. It's also the only time that Yoda's relationship with Dooku is actually explored a little bit, which is kind of a shame. Even if it is one-sided in this sense, it's at least they bother exploring it here. While I think it's a crime that at no point does the show really actually bother exploring the relationship between Dooku and Yoda. Which is kind of a shame, because you would think that would be a heavily explored topic.
You would think.
I mean, you would think. But
Dark Rendezvous exists, so I guess you get that, but not in film. I do admit, Well,
that's the problem, though. I think that's almost the paradox with the show. It treats certain things as if you did read the EU, but then they don't actually adhere to the EU and just contradict it. As... To quote Sheev in his impersonation of Yoda, if into the external lore you go, only contradictions will you find.
Yes. Unfortunately, this season is full of contradictions. It's full of ramifications. There is a good reason why it is known as the Lost Missions, and it's considered to be the worst season.
It got lost in its making.
Yeah. And it's considered to be the worst season by a majority of the fans. And that's not counting season 5. This is an unofficial season, but then they basically put it back. And this was actually going to be the last season, but then they just said, nope. But then they decided, okay, well, we actually did plan for season 7, so we got to put this back. And now, we get season 7. So, as a whole, this season, as we said, is a roller coaster.
Yeah, it's going to close us out.
It is a roller coaster. So the best by and far.
I'd actually say the first half of the season is actually pretty okay.
Yeah,
for the most part.
And then
it has its hiccups, but it's to me it's a shaky roller coaster where it's shaky, but the general foundation is still there. It's when you get to the Jar Jar Mace ones are kind of like, okay, it's getting, or it just
Or
complete
you know,
nosedive.
you're going through the loop de loop, but then the
It stops before it completes.
or it just falls and everybody on board just dies. It's horrible.
If you want a good example of how this season is, as far as how it feels, just watch the roller coaster scene in Final Destination 3. That's pretty much the feeling. Like, it's like shaky start, rough foundation, you know something's gonna go wrong,
And then
and then
something
it
goes
does.
horribly wrong.
and then everything just falls apart. That's pretty much the entire basis with this season. And it's a shame because credit to season 6 where it's due. I appreciate its effort to try to tread new ground. I appreciate the effort. It's just it's the idea of I can appreciate an inexperienced runner for trying to sprint. Doesn't change the fact that he tripped over and fell flat on his face.
Yeah. It's like it's basically you're stuck in a maze except everything in the maze. It's like this kind of reminds me a little bit of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, where the book is actually as the book series went on, the books became longer, and as a result, the filmmakers had to cut significant sections of the book because you're trying to adapt a book. The thing is, the big things that were supposed to be adapted in Goblet of Fire were never conceived, or they were never actually written in because
of that, the story is made messier
it's
because of it.
very messy. Like if I had to make it a comparison here, I would say this season is the Half-Blood Prince movie in everything pretty much, because it is an adaptation of the book. Like the movie is an adaptation of the book, but it changes so many things, and there's so many ramifications that you kind of feel like you're watching an entirely different movie from an entirely different series.
And by the same context, the ramifications surrounding season 6, it's simultaneously trying to adapt certain storylines, like certain concepts from the EU, but doing it in such a way that's so rushed, while simultaneously contradicting stated. And this is important because season 6 is technically considered the last season that is part of that old timeline. You know, season 7 is exclusively Disney canon, so EU don't really matter. Yeah. But with season 6, it's like any semblance of continuity in the Clone Wars era that could have been salvaged from TCW in relation to the is just destroyed in season 6. Like, season 1 through 5 is already like extremely rough ground, and trying to make that fit is generally like extremely difficult. But like this practically makes it impossible.
It's basically the equivalent of you're trying to get past a wall and you basically decide, okay, let's throw a nuke at it and see what happens.
Yeah, like at that point, you're just destroyed the wall. You know, like you defeated the purpose of why you're trying to. Yeah, it's ridiculous in every form, and I think what's also just a shame about it is it really just had so many ramifications that effectively there's almost no way to salvage this from here without like just burning it out of the brain.
Yeah.
Because even the very first arc has a lot of ramifications. Now, for the most part, like I said, with the biochips, at least with that, even though I don't personally agree with that story decision, at least it's a case of does that retcon the films as a whole?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, because it just recontextualizes, which, you know, that's kind of what TCW is known for, so I'm not really that worried about the Clovis arc. Generally a fine addition that explores Anakin and Padme's relationship, which is nice. The Jar Jar Mace Windu episode, aside from the bullshit related to Mother Talzin's magic mechanics, it's pretty safe and inoffensive.
And then
It's when you get to the final four that it's like complete and utter just what are you doing?
this is the equivalent of a Thanos taking the Infinity Gauntlet and basically using it to basically destroy basically half of the Star Wars mythos, essentially.
Yes, exactly. And to me, I don't think it's coincidence that the final four are the ones that are the messiest. Because my opinion on this comes down to a simple thing. Because given that season 6 was in development around the time George buyout, my theory is because normally, even though George's supervision of TCW was always very loose, at least within the previous seasons, he was always there to a little bit.
Yeah.
I think by the time we get to the Yoda arc in the Sifo Dyas storyline by extension, I think that was the point in time where George wasn't really involved anymore. Not really.
No.
Like, I think that was probably the point in time where George was finalizing the deal with Disney.
Yeah.
So, at that point, it's kind of like... And so for me, I feel like it's a case of saying that because he wasn't there, there was no one to really ground Dave Filoni team from just throwing all these different ideas in at once, even though it's like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Because Dave is kind of one of those people where, in a way, he is kind of, this is the one part he has a lot in common with George, but in almost with him, is Dave is the type of person who, he is a visual storyteller much more than he is a visual presenter much more than he is an adequate writer. He is someone that, yeah, he can make really beautiful artistry scenes. He's great at that. But when it comes with him actually trying to make a plot coherent the entire time, he just can't do it. And so the problem with him is that if he doesn't have someone to bounce off of and ground his concepts a little bit, he just goes off the rails, man. He really does.
Look at some of the episodes of
Rebels.
Rebels. I mean,
he literally interjected time travel into the canon just to prevent his OC from dying.
To be fair though, he was involved with getting Thrawn introduced into this.
No, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Dave Filoni hasn't done good things. I'm just saying, again, stuff like that between the Mortis trilogy. Between the Mortis trilogy, between that, the Night Sister magic, and now all this in season 6, it's like, those are the living personification of what happens when Dave Filoni gets off the rails with concepts. That is what happens. And I think even George knows that to a degree, because, like, what was the biggest thing about George as soon as the Night Sisters get introduced and discovers all these, like, broken mechanics? George is like, alright, we can't have this in Revenge of the Sith because that's gonna break everything, so, yeah, we're gonna have an episode where the Separatists commit, like, genocide against the entire clan, just to make sure they don't become a problem later on.
Well, it is established the Night Sisters are kind of isolationists in the way they operate, so they don't actually have a stake in the Clone Wars besides, prior to
Ventress. But the problem is that now that Ventress has a tie, and given Ventress' story, that interjects them. And so now, because of that, they have a direct involvement where if they don't get wiped out when they did, that changes a lot. So now it's kind of the issue of Mortis, at least for the most part, was pretty self-contained outside ramifications, which I don't even get into. Night Sisters, again, mostly wiped out, with the exception of the Mother Talzin issue, which gets resolved in Son of Dathomir comics. That's also non-issue.
Also, Morgan Elspeth and Marin are the only.
That's a Disney issue, though, so that's something we'll get into later. But it's but yeah, with the ramifications surrounding the Vision Quest and the knowledge of Sifo Dyas, the Revenge of the Sith time frame now is just shattered.
Oh,
And
speaking of Ventress, let's quickly talk about Dark Disciple for a quick second, or do you want to save that for season
we
7?
can't do that because that actually Dark Disciple would originally be.
Well, since we're here, we might as well quickly talk about it, and basically, because it's not officially canon.
Alright, fine. We can make an honorable mention.
Okay, so Dark Disciple actually explains a couple things regarding Ventress, like she actually grows her hair back, she gets a yellow lightsaber, but...
Effectively, it's the same as the design from the Bad Batch, pretty much.
Oh, yes. And a funny thing I learned over the course of research for this video, the voice actress for Ventress is the same actress who voices Catwoman in Batman the Brave and the Bold. And just look up the Birds of Prey song, which is basically Huntress, Black Canary, and Catwoman singing a musical number, jazz number that is full
Great
of
scene.
that is
Great scene.
that is full of innuendos. However, the voice actress, she actually has really good range, believe it or not. She's actually really good in that role.
Goes from doing a musical number as Catwoman to being Count Dooku's pet serial killer. Let that speak it for itself.
And also she
Yeah.
stabs an ARC trooper and proceeds to kiss him, which was not in the original in the original broadcast.
It's fun stuff. But yeah, generally Dark Disciple is just, it's an interesting storyline in its own merits. Its ramifications are especially kind of neutered now, given that Ventress kind of got retconned to be alive, because in the book she gets killed off at the pretty much
Speaking of which, since I have to bring this up, somehow Ventress survived.
Oh, fuck you. But putting all that aside, yeah, season 6 is it's doozy. I will credit. So, if I'm going to be generous on my rating, 5 out of 10.
Well, I'm going to be much harsher because of the ramifications, and also just because, there is a good reason why this season is considered to be the worst season out of all 7. I'm going to go with a 3.
Oh, dear God. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, probably in a more realistic sense, I'm 4 range. The only thing that salvages the season in any sense is the conspiracy arc is generally pretty well handled for the most part. Even though there's ramifications surrounding the inhibitor, just a headache to talk about. But at least in the context of season 6, it's not too crazy.
It's not
I think
crazy.
it's when you get to season 7 in the Bad Batch that there's a lot more to talk about.
Well, it's actually when you get into the Bad Batch itself a little bit too, because there's no spoilers, but the inhibitor comes up again, but this time there's
a lot more to do with it.
There's it's in the Imperial period, basically. Anyway,
yeah. And then the Clovis arc is generally pretty well handled. So I would say, like, I took all the unknown. So 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. So yeah, like, I would generally say 7 out of the 13 episodes are handled pretty okay for the most part. It's when you get to the Jar Jar ones are kind of like, you can take them or leave them. It doesn't really matter. And then, yeah, it's that final 4 episodes that are really just broken beyond belief. But
yeah,
as a whole, season 6 is, it's there. It has its stuff, but yeah, that kind of wraps up things with season 6. And that concludes our podcast review for this. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to us as two Nerd Rage ranters. Reference Jin Sarai there. And yeah, stay tuned for season 7, which will be going on Deadponics channel.
Stay tuned for scenes for our next episode of Survivor. Next time on Survivor, the A-Team gets involved. Oh boy, I'm excited. Trust me. For the boomers out there, if you know who the A-Team is, you'll get excited for the next season. Anyway, I'm out of here. I got a mess to clean up.